You're watching a special edition of Pronews 7 at 10. The Pronews 7 Talk, Refugees. Here's Jay Ritchie.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's conversation, and we hope you send us a question via our Facebook page, our website, or Twitter. Before we get to that, Brian James has a quick update on tonight's weather. Brian?
Hey there, Jay. Well, we are looking at still some areas of drizzle that have been developing across central parts of the Panhandle, and with that, temperatures still a little bit above freezing, but as we head through the nighttime hours with that drizzle and the strong winds, have to watch out for some of those bridges and overpasses icing over. Let's take a quick look at our Skycam shot, looking out over the I-40, I-27 interchange, and it has been a little bit dicey out there in a few spots, some slick spots already developing. Looking down toward the south right now, traffic moving along just fine, but you look at downtown current conditions right now, we're at 36 degrees, so we're about 4 degrees above freezing, but north winds are howling around 20 to 30 miles an hour. Some of the wind gusts have been around 40 miles an hour already. We'll talk more about the forecast coming up here in just a little bit. Jay, back to you.
Brian, thank you. This week we presented a three-part series that examined the refugee impact in our area. We began in Cactus, where efforts have been made to reverse a reputation for lawlessness since many refugees came to work at the Swift plant in 2006. Now, many refugees say they love living there because it's convenient and peaceful. Dumas Junior High showed us its ESL class and introduced us to a man who's made an impact communicating between school officials and Burmese parents. When many refugees arrived, they didn't understand American customs like compulsory school attendance. Dumas ISD says it was tough at first, but success is coming. And finally, we met a few refugees who've become Americans and productive citizens of the Texas Panhandle. We were also introduced to the organizations that work with refugees here. Invitations were extended to several people to appear on tonight's program, and what we came up with is this panel of three. KVII-TV, the area director at Amarillo's Office of Refugee Services of Texas, Moore County Judge Rowdy Rhodes, and Mark Strobel, the Dumas ISD superintendent. Gentlemen, thank you for being here for this discussion. Let's start with something that came from Facebook and Sharon. Sharon says, are any of you actively involved in making sure we're not taking so many refugees that will be bursting at the seams trying to provide for them and for the people who've been living here before the refugees arrived? Fabian, would you take that question first?
Yes, every year we do projections. We work with our national. There's actually 9 national VOLAGs that come together and discuss what the capacity is for a city, what the capacity is for school districts, and that's done every year on a national level.
Moore County, Judge Rhodes, how do you get involved in that kind of a conversation?
Well, actually, we're kind of a reverse type situation where through the judicial system we do handle them a little bit different so that they don't become homeless, they don't lose their jobs when they're arrested, maybe speed the process up a little bit, which frees up our jails and basically keeps them employed and keeps them from having homeless.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, what kind of input has Dumas ISD had into this formula, this equation?
Of course, we have compulsory attendance, and so any refugee or any other student, for that matter, comes to school. We allow them into school, of course.
We need to get an education from you all on this comment from Jackie on Facebook. Jackie says there are far too many Americans who could use the assistance that is so readily available to refugees, but they have to jump through hoops just to apply for those benefits, whereas they're just handed to the refugees as soon as they come into our country. Now, a lot of us don't know how benefits are parceled out and divvied up to refugees, so educate us. Mark, I'll start with you for what you know from the Dumas ISD. How does that system work as far as you're concerned?
Well, a school district will get funding for ESL, for refugees, for any students. And so the number of students that we have depends on the amount of funding that we get from the federal government or from the state.
Is it as cut and dried as Jackie talks about here? Is it fair as far as you're concerned?
It's fair. I mean, we're going to educate all kids, and we're going to receive the funding to educate those students.
Okay. Judge Rhodes, what is your take on how this system works in terms of where Moore County comes from?
Well, and we don't receive any funding, so we kind of have to do things a little bit different. Like I said, we do have to handle them a little bit different, a little special to get them through the process a little faster, and it's been a real learning experience for us.
Mm-hmm. And Fabian, what kind of comments can you make about how the funding is available to them, helping them react?
Well, once again, it's the State Department that brings the refugees. They're all legal. they give them a loan to fly here, but the refugee has to pay that loan back. Just like anybody else, they're allowed food stamps for 4 months, and then it's reevaluated after they get a job, and most of them can't get them again because they're making too much money. Same thing with Medicaid. They allow them to get 8 months of Medicaid for any medical needs that they have. But again, though, once they get a job, they pay back to Medicaid. They pay taxes. They pay city taxes. A lot of them are buying homes, very successful, property taxes, and so, I mean, then it goes like just like anybody else.
I hope that helps with that question. That's the first segment, gentlemen. Thank you so much. We'll have more comment and more question following this break.
You're watching a special edition of Pro News 7 at 10, the Pro News 7 Talk, Refugees. Here's Jay Ritchie.
One of the parties that was unable to be with us tonight is Catholic Charities of the Texas Panhandle. That agency and Refugee Services of Texas that Fabian represents expedite the placement of refugees in our area. Its executive director, Nancy Coons, did grant me an interview yesterday to be part of this program. When Coons took that job a few years ago, the first thing she did was to reduce the number of refugees her agency handled each year. So I asked her how she handled criticism that made Catholic Charities appear less compassionate and understanding about the refugees' plight.
I think that makes us more understanding, because in the long run it's for the betterment of the refugee. What is best for the refugee? When we bring them in at a rate that the schools cannot provide a proper education to them, then the refugee is the one that's going to hurt the most. When we cannot help them achieve the American dream by providing them more intense ESL, occupational ESL, things that are not necessarily in our contracts with the government, but when we can provide greater services to them and help them achieve the American dream, that's what resettlement should be about, so that they can integrate better into the community.
And Coons said if we keep resettling overly high numbers of refugees, it could create an unwelcome backlash, and it could prevent us from giving them the education and the opportunities they need. Panel, about that soundbite and about education, Joe is asking, do you think it's fair, with all the strain on resources the refugees are causing in our schools, that my kids and the kids who live here already are getting a lower quality education because of overcrowding and having to deal with so many language issues? So Fabian, on the education question and on the soundbite that you just heard from Nancy Coons.
Once again, a lot of the refugees that are here weren't resettled through Catholic Charities or through Refugee Services of Texas, because they are legal, they're able to travel freely, and I think that's one of the things that they appreciate, that they come here, they find freedom. And so a lot of the refugees that are actually in Amarillo weren't resettled here, they came from other states because of employment and the economy a lot better.
Your agencies now, though, are backing them up, are providing them services that help them continue on with their education.
Well, and this is why, you know, where we try to stabilize our numbers, because they're going to end up here anyway. So it's better that they go through a program that they could get the help they need. But as far as, I mean, a refugee could come here and they might move out to another state. And so we do our best. And Catholic Charities, they actually have a grant for extended case management, so a refugee is able to get that extended case management up to 5 years. Okay.
Judge Rhodes, yours take on what was talked about by Catholic Charities there, and about the strain on resources that you might be seeing in Moore County.
You know, Moore County, we're a small county, but we've had several challenges over the years that just made us stronger. We're really fortunate to have a real strong school district, because those teachers have been challenged and come out ahead. I mean, Canyon Independent School District probably doesn't have to deal with anything our school district does. All these challenges have just made us stronger. We've adapted to them. You know, we always come out on top. It's the old-fashioned saying, is your cup half full or half empty? Well, in Moore County, it's half full.
Do you think the fact that you're small makes it easier to deal with than some a bigger district here, or maybe like a Houston?
I think so. We don't have as many, probably, extended resources, but what we have we utilize, and we're a team. Our county is a team between the hospital district, the school district, all the law enforcement. We're a team.
And Mark, directly to you, the soundbite that you heard, and also that question about, are we really straining those resources in school that are making it not so fair for everybody in the classroom?
Well, I think education, of course, it's going to be a free education for everyone. And so straining the resources, no doubt it takes more resources to educate a refugee than it would someone that had been born in Dumas or Amarillo or any other place in Texas or the United States. So in that fact, it really doesn't strain the resources to provide to these students. However, I agree with Rowdy. We are a strong community with all of our organizations working together. In our school district, about 9% of our population are Burmese, which is a high number. We have close to 300 some odd refugee students. And so when you have that many students and that high number of a percentage rate within the school system, then we're hiring more ESL teachers, more interpreters that way. But it doesn't affect then our regular ed, because once we have them to where they can go into the regular ed, into the core classes, able to speak the language on their own, then they'll be right there with other students. So our top achieving students are getting the quality of education that they need.
I want to ask you after the break about how much that's costing you. Having interpreters for what you say are 15 different languages up there has got to be taxing, but we'll talk about in just a minute right after these commercial messages.
You're watching a special edition of Pro News 7 at 10, the Pro News 7 Talk Refugees. Here's Jay Ritchie.
And welcome back to tonight's final talk segment. Another of the parties who could not be with us tonight is Amarillo ISD, but Kevin Phillips, the Palo Duro Cluster Director, also granted me an interview yesterday. Phillips says 30 languages are spoken now on some Amarillo campuses, but I asked him if AISD is part of the discussions aimed at keeping the flow of refugees manageable.
We have very good conversations with our service providers, and they are very open to listening and being aware of the challenge that we have. And so our line of communication is really with them. They keep informed and are aware of what the challenges are, specifically how, in our case in Amarillo, because of the neighborhood school concept, that this does impact a small number of our schools to a greater degree than every school in our district. And so, yes, we're in conversation with them. We were in conversation with folks from the city, from the health department, so that we can coordinate services where possible. And so, yes, we are involved in an ongoing conversation about the challenges that this presents.
Phillips says AISD believes in that neighborhood school concept where kids go to school close to where they live. He says some districts bus refugee children, spread them around to ease the strain of their numbers, but he does acknowledge that for the 8 campuses he supervises, that is pretty challenging. That, gentleman, leads us into something Sandra commented on Facebook, quote, "Why do we need refugees here in this country? There are Americans here that are having to do without because they cannot find work, they're homeless, they're going hungry. Send the refugees home," she says. "America cannot take care of everybody. America should take care of the Americans first, then take care of others afterwards." I know you've heard these kinds of comments time and time again with the jobs that you have. What do you say when a person gives you that opinion, especially, Mark, when it talks about schools, where schools are concerned? Talk about that and about your how much it cost you for interpreters for 15 languages.
Well, first of all, America was built something similar to this. We've had people coming to America for years, whether they were immigrants or refugees. Being a school superintendent, of course, I have a passion for people, and especially for students. It's our job to make sure that they're going to be productive, because if we don't teach them and they don't learn, then they will be a detriment to society. So we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that they're educated so they can pay tax like you and I, be productive, get a job, and be self-fulfilling.
Now, are you finding all the necessary interpreters with the money that you have to work with?
You know, years ago when we had the large influx of the Burmese, we had a tough time finding the interpreters because that was a language that was not spoken in Dumas. And so JBS Swift beef packing plant was hiring all the Burmese employees. And so we had to up our salary to get the Burmese that were working at JBS to come and be our interpreter. And we had some quality interpreters. One has married a game warden now that lives out at Cactus. And so the stress of trying to get interpreters to help educating these students was a challenge at the beginning.
Judge Rhodes, your comments when you hear something like send the refugees home, those kind of comments.
Well, you have a type of work at JBS that really and truly nobody wants to do, If you look back in the history, I had a neighbor across the street was a big rancher farmer, and the Hispanic population were the one that did the work, illegals, and like I said earlier, if something happened to them, they took them to the vet because they were afraid to take them to the doctor. So that, through Moore County, through the school district, everybody's getting educated and going to college. So you see that workforce go away to go to college, and we did have immigration hit us in 2006 that scared away the illegal immigrants, but also those that weren't. So you had JBS bring in refugees to stay in business. So nobody else I know wants to do that work, and that supplies them with a job. Now, as far as cost, I did look. I think from October 1st is our beginning of our budget year till now, we've spent about $10,000 on translations, but only about 1,700 has been, refugees.
Okay. And about 45 seconds left for Fabian. You've been dealing with this for 5 or 6 years now. When you get that kind of a comment bordering on racism, I have to say, how do you deal with that?
Well, number one, the refugee program is not new. It goes back to World War II. A lot of Europeans were resettled. And I always tell people that every one of us has a story how our relatives got here. And if you don't know your story, you need to find out, because either your grandfather, your great-grandfather, or your great-grandfather came from somewhere. And so that's how I usually respond to it.
Okay. Gentlemen, I appreciate you being here. Fabian and Rowdy and Mark, thank you for your comments. More information about this you can find on connectamarillo.com. Stay tuned. Right after the break, Ryan James and That Forecast.